I never expected a simple ride on my ATV to turn my quiet life upside down, but that's exactly what happened the day HOA Karen decided she wanted my ATV for her son. It all started on a sunny Saturday morning. I was polishing my ATV, making sure it was spotless for a quick ride through the trails behind my property. Little did I know Karen from the HOA, the woman who always seemed to find a problem with everything, was already plotting. Karen had a reputation in the neighborhood for being overbearing. She complained about everything, from lawn heights to mailbox placement, but I never imagined she'd go after something that wasn't even hers. The moment she saw my ATV parked outside, her eyes lit up like a kid spotting a candy store. And before I could even greet her, she marched up to me with that smug expression, demanding that I let her son borrow it. "You really think you should be keeping this here?" she snapped, her voice dripping with false concern. "My son could use it. It's just sitting here anyway." I tried to reason with her. I explained that the ATV was mine, registered in my name, and wasn't available for anyone else's use. But Karen wasn't listening. She cut me off mid-sentence, her fingers already dialing the HOA office, and soon I realized the police. Within 30 minutes, flashing lights appeared at the end of my driveway. 2 officers stepped out looking puzzled as Karen painted her exaggerated story about my illegal use of the ATV, insisting I was somehow violating HOA rules. My blood boiled. Not just because Karen was lying, but because she had absolutely no clue who she was messing with. You see, a few months prior, I had encountered a legal issue with a different neighbor, and it turned out I had an unlikely ally, the state attorney, a quiet, behind-the-scenes connection that most people didn't know about. But today, it was about to make all the difference. As Karen kept rattling off her complaints, I calmly reached for my phone and told the officers, "Before you proceed, you might want to know. I already have the state attorney involved if any false claims are made." The officers paused. Karen's face went pale. She hadn't anticipated this at all. What started as her usual power trip was quickly spiraling out of her control. In that moment, I realized I had the upper hand, and the look of frustration on her face made me smirk. Just a little. I could feel the tension building, and I knew this wasn't going to end today. Karen's next move would determine how far she was willing to go, and I was ready for every twist. Little did she know, the ATV wasn't just a toy. It was my ticket to proving that even the boldest HOA, Karen, could be taken down if she stepped too far. Karen's face was frozen, a mix of disbelief and fury as the officers glanced between her and me. You could almost see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how she had miscalculated. She had assumed that her complaints alone were enough to bully me into giving up my ATV, but she had seriously underestimated what she was dealing with. The officers asked me to explain the situation, and I did so calmly, recounting the events and emphasizing that I had all proper ownership, documents, and registration. I also mentioned, once again, that the state attorney was aware of any false claims she might try to make. I could see her frustration growing. The smug superiority she had walked in with was evaporating fast. "You can't just call the police every time someone has something you want," I finally said, my voice steady but firm. Karen opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "You can't just lie to them either." Her eyes narrowed, and she tried to save face, insisting that I was exaggerating the situation. "I'm just trying to help my son," she stammered. "You're making this personal." It was almost comical, the way she tried to justify her actions. I had expected confrontation, but this level of audacity was new. Karen didn't seem to understand that her attempts to manipulate others wouldn't work with someone prepared and legally backed. I had anticipated this kind of escalation, and I remained unshaken. The officers, unsure what to do, asked if we could resolve this without further involvement. I suggested Karen leave the property and let the matter cool down. She refused, at least at first, until one of the officers mentioned that any false report could land her in legal trouble, especially with the state attorney already aware of my situation. That seemed to finally sink in. Karen fumed silently, muttering under her breath as she gathered her things and stomped back toward her car, but I could tell this wasn't over. I knew her type, the kind of person who held grudges, plotted revenge, and believed that rules were only for everyone else. She was already scheming her next move, and I had to be prepared. I watched her leave, the adrenaline slowly fading, but my mind was racing. I knew she would be back, in one form or another, and when she did, I had to make sure she wouldn't get away with anything, not this time. The fact that I had the state attorney in my corner gave me confidence, but it didn't mean I could be careless. Karen's obsession with the ATV and her son would drive her to irrational lengths, and I needed to stay 2 steps ahead. That day, I realized that owning an ATV in a neighborhood with someone like Karen wasn't just about having fun, it was about protecting myself, my property, and my sanity from someone who truly believed they were untouchable. Karen didn't waste any time. Within a couple of days, I started noticing subtle signs that she was plotting something. It began with passive-aggressive notes taped to the community bulletin board, claiming that I was breaking HOA rules by keeping an ATV in my driveway. Then came the phone calls, anonymous tips to the HOA office, emails demanding action, and even messages to neighbors, trying to paint me as reckless and irresponsible. Her desperation was almost entertaining if it weren't so dangerous. I knew Karen well enough to recognize the pattern. She had already learned that direct confrontation wasn't working, so she switched tactics to manipulation and intimidation. That's when I decided it was time to get proactive. I reached out to my contact at the state attorney's office, giving them a full rundown of everything Karen had done so far. I wanted a record, a legal shield, in case her antics escalated into something more serious. Sure enough, her next move was bold and risky. One morning, as I was getting ready to take the ATV out for a ride, I noticed her standing across the street, pretending to chat with neighbors, but clearly keeping an eye on me. When she saw me notice her, she waved with a fake smile, as if nothing was happening. It was obvious she was trying to bait me into a confrontation so she could call the police again or report me to the HOA. But this time I had a plan. I made sure to record the entire interaction on my phone. Her words, her actions, everything. I even staged a casual conversation about how much I loved writing legally and responsibly, making it impossible for her to spin the story later. Karen didn't know what was coming next. Later that day, I got a call from the state attorney's office. They had reviewed my documentation and were prepared to intervene if Karen tried to escalate. I could almost hear her wheels turning in her head. She was used to getting her way, but now her usual tactics were going to backfire spectacularly. By the time I drove past her house on my ATV, waving politely, I noticed her jaw tighten. She had realized that I wasn't just any neighbor she could intimidate. I was prepared, legally backed, and fully aware of her schemes. Her obsession with my ATV had turned into a trap for herself, and it was only a matter of time before the tables turned completely. I could feel the tension crackling in the air. Karen was dangerous in her obsession, but I was ready for every move. The next showdown wouldn't just be about an ATV. It would be about proving that someone who hides behind lies and power trips can't always get what they want. And this time, the consequences would be hers to face. It all came to a head one Friday afternoon. I had finished my work early and decided to take the ATV out for a long ride, fully aware that Karen was likely lurking somewhere, ready to pounce. As I pulled out of my driveway, I noticed her standing by the edge of the road, phone in hand, clearly preparing to call the police again. She had that same smug look, thinking she had the upper hand. But this time, I was ready. Before she could dial, I drove slowly toward her and waved, keeping the interaction calm but intentional. "Good afternoon, Karen," I said with a casual smile. "Just taking the ATV out for a legal ride." Her eyes narrowed, and she sputtered. Something about breaking HOA rules and reporting me. I simply nodded and continued, all while keeping my phone recording. Every word, every gesture, every attempt at intimidation was captured. Karen's frustration was obvious. She had underestimated me once again. Within minutes, I got a text from my contact at the state attorney's office. "We're monitoring the situation. Any false report or harassment will be acted on immediately." That was all I needed. Karen didn't realize that the legal shield I had in place would make any attempt to involve the police or the HOA a huge liability for her. By late afternoon, she escalated further. She drove her car directly in front of my driveway, attempting to block my exit, a bold, reckless move. But I stayed calm. I calmly called my contact at the state attorney's office, explaining the situation in real time. Within moments, a formal warning was issued to her, making it clear that any obstruction, harassment, or false claims would carry legal consequences. Karen's expression shifted from confidence to panic. She realized that her obsession with the ATV and her son had led her to a position where she was the one in jeopardy. All her lies, her manipulations, and her attempts at intimidation had backfired completely. For the first time, she looked genuinely defeated. By the end of the day, she drove off, defeated and silent. I finally sat on my ATV, taking a deep breath. What had started as a simple dispute over a vehicle had turned into a full-blown lesson in power, preparation, and knowing your rights. Karen thought she could bully me, manipulate the authorities, and get what she wanted. But she had no idea that I was prepared for every step of her plan. That day, the ATV wasn't just a machine for fun, it became a symbol of standing your ground. And Karen learned the hard way that obsession, lies, and entitlement only go so far when someone is ready, legal, and unshakable. In the end, the victory wasn't just about keeping my ATV. It was about proving that even the boldest HOA, Karen, could be outsmarted if you stayed calm, documented everything, and had the right allies. And that's the story of how HOA Karen wanted my ATV for her son, called the police, and had no idea I already had the state attorney watching every move. Wow. Can you believe how bold Karen got? If you enjoyed this crazy HOA showdown, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another wild story. And I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's see who has the boldest comeback idea. Stay tuned, because the next story is going to be even crazier. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.